Hi Chris, how are you?
Good morning, Rod. Yeah, here we go again for our pre-recorded show for the 26th of August, and it will be episode 135. And the weather is the same as it was last week, funnily enough.
Well, a whole week has passed in the, whatever it was, 1 hour and 7 minutes it took us to record the last podcast.
Yeah, so hopefully it'll be a quiet week for news in one way, because we won't be reporting on it, but another way, I hope there is something interesting because there's not a lot going on. So yeah, be interested to see where we are in a couple of weeks' time when we catch up.
Well, not in the last hour, but I presume there'll be another beta for iOS in the point we're not recording, and we'll be able to talk about that when we come back next time, and hopefully we'll see some changes to things we've whinged about on this show, particularly regarding the pop-ups, which are now monthly and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it does feel like iOS 18 is largely bedded down now, though, and they're on their weekly cadence, and they're getting ready for launch, is what it feels like. And then obviously we've got iOS 18.1 in beta, and that feels like the big one where you're going to start getting some of these AI features, or Apple Intelligence, should we say. Should we dive into follow-up?
Let's dive into follow-up. I haven't got an awful lot, obviously, because we've been through most of it in the last show, but related to the last thing we talked about with Pixel phones, where we were praising how good it was they were doing the hardware, and there was an awful lot on AI focus, but apparently it surfaced that they're, no pun intended for Microsoft, Google is threatening tech influencers unless they preferred the Pixel. So in sort of blind taste tests and things like that, they want you to really come down Team Pixel. A Pixel 9 review agreement required influencers to showcase the Pixel over competitors or have their relationship terminated. Google now says the language missed the mark. Well, that's pretty vile behaviour, isn't it?
Well, so I'm going to just read this out. By opting into it, so it's called Brand Love on their questionnaire. By opting into this program, do you acknowledge that you are expected to feature the Google Pixel device in place of any competitor mobile devices? Please note that if it appears other brands are being preferred over the Pixel, we will need to cease the relationship between the brand and the creator. I mean, that language is fairly straightforward to interpret, I think. Like, basically, you've got to say, give us your brand love or we're going to cancel you. Like, I'm sorry, that's awful.
It is awful.
What were they expecting though? Like,
I don't know. I mean, let's try and be a slightly objective for a minute. I don't know what Apple people sign before they send them review units. Now, having said that, Marquez, Jason Snell, others are fairly brutally honest about where they find the deficiency in a product. We knew about the keyboards, for example, way back in the day when they handed these things out. So yeah, I mean, I don't think Apple or other Samsung, for example, do the same kind of thing. So this is not good behaviour.
It's just awful. What were they expecting though? Like, and their comeback of the language missed the mark, and I think the language was pretty bang on what you were trying to do there, Google. I don't know. I just don't think Google are owning this particularly well. They should have said this was a mistake. We've removed it. Job done. Let's all move on. But no, they've said the language missed the mark. I just don't agree with that.
Well, there is a difference between, I guess, send a phone to Marquez, who has to review your phone, otherwise your phone's not worth anything because he's made such an impact in the market, and those who are on this Team Pixel program. So I presume Team Pixel is a segment of influencers against a tech journalist who works for The Guardian, or Marquez, or Jason, or someone like that. So, maybe
they're more like influencers, aren't they? Or, brand ambassadors, maybe.
But even so, it's not right. If you find a serious deficiency in a device or something you don't like, or an iPhone takes a better picture in certain lighting conditions, you should be allowed to say that. I
completely agree with you. You should be honest. And that's what Marcus Brownlee has got us to, I think, is a lot more honest, open reviews. And this is going backwards on that. I just don't think it's very good at Google.
No, and also what's not good for Google is apparently nearly all Pixel phones have an exposed unpatched flaw hidden within the Android app, and this is all down to Verizon, the mobile phone carrier.
So how does this work then?
Apparently, and Apple are the people that changed this, back in the day, you would have carrier-branded versions of operating systems, particularly in the early smartphone days. So you'd release your phone and it would be emblazoned Verizon or T-Mobile or Vodafone. We'd see a lot. I think you may even still see. Actually, I don't walk into mobile phone shops very much anymore, but the carrier would have their name on the device. HTC, that company, were particularly well known for letting brands appear over the top of them. The iPhone changed this. All you got on the iPhone was an Apple logo, and obviously this, when Android was launching, when Google were launching Android, weren't in the same place as Apple. The HTC G1, for example, launched with the carrier's logo on it, as they always had. all these device manufacturers wanted their showcase apps on the phone. In this case, it was to have like a shop mode, so it would flip through screens to show what was going on. And this showcase APK is apparently still on all Android phones up to this day, which is just incredible.
That is bonkers, isn't it? Now you've explained it, it does make sense. And I was just skimming through the article. But yeah, you're right, Apple did change this, because I remember buying phones in the past and you'd end up with this horrible, Vodafone UI that was all very red and a bit garish. And to be fair to Apple, they did help they changed the world with that one by not having phone manufacturers do it. But this is bad that it's just sat there in the background. You just thought this would be something they'd be squashing quite quickly, because why would you want this running the whole time on your phone is one question, and they haven't disabled it, or there's not a setting for it. So yeah, it's not good, and it sounds like this was reported to Google in May as well, so they've had plenty of time to respond.
Well, we talked about a 15-year bug in 0.0.0.0 involving browsers and things last week, so I'm not surprised, right? Sorry, 2 weeks ago at this point. This bug isn't present on Pixel 9 devices, so they've finally dealt with it, but yeah, it's really not very good. And somebody like a Palantir or a Pegasus or something like that has been using this to actively exploit vulnerabilities in Android phones.
Yeah, 100%. I'm sure somebody out there is exploiting this and very much doesn't want this to go away.
All of these companies focus on security, but I do worry about how many of these loopholes are left in things, possibly deliberately to allow state-sponsored actors to get into your devices. And as we've talked about last week, your data is not really all that private anymore anyway, but none of this helps.
Not when they leak 2.7 billions worth of data records across multiple countries and continents.
Anyway, it's quite good we got any follow-up this week, considering how short ago it was we recorded the last episode, but I've got nothing else in follow-up. Have you got anything?
No, but it's a shame to have two negative Google articles when I think we were both quite impressed with what Google had done with their Pixel 9 release.
I agree with you. At the same time, they've done something about it now. That APK is not in the Google 9 phones. Fair enough, they've been slightly negative about some influencers, but I think you should be looking at many of influencers' videos with a pinch of salt. Anyway, I would trust a review from The Guardian or Marquez more than I would some random person on YouTube who just happens to have been sent a phone. And actually, I don't think it's a bad attitude to take in general when you're looking at tech reviews of have they paid for this product themselves? Have they been sent it and have they explicitly said they're gonna, they're free to say whatever they want about it? We're going to talk about my thing of the week later on, and the gentleman that's on that always states if he's bought the thing or if he's been sent a review copy, and when he takes them apart, and he does take them apart, he is very clear about how he's contacted manufacturers, emails that have gone back and forth about them, and that sort of credibility that you get as a reviewer of products I think is very important. So I suspect some of Team Pixel maybe have been always going to say the right thing about the Google phones anyway.
Yeah, true. And people should disclose, obviously, if they've had sponsorship, if they've been given something. We've not been given anything, so we can say whatever we like.
And do.
That is fair.
But if you want to give us some money and influence what we say, we're quite open to that.
That is true. But we will disclose it. But we would disclose it first.
We would absolutely disclose it. We're very honest gentlemen. Should we do some news?
Yes, dive into some news. So what have we got here? We've got iPhones will help decide offside violations in English soccer, in English football this season. So this is quite interesting because I do watch a little bit of football with my youngest son, and there's always a bit of a pause, and the ref goes and looks at the VAR system. So it's interesting how it's going to move to smartphones, which I did not realise this was going to be a thing for Apple devices.
This would be a great link up with Ted Lasso, wouldn't it? You've got iPhones watching all the line... all right, I'm going to express my ignorance right from that. I don't know what the offside rule is. I do know what football is. You kick the ball in the net is the idea. I presume this is like Hawkeye in the tennis then? It watches the line to see if the ball's gone over it. Is that what the plan is here?
It's not so much the line, it's more... and look, I'm not the world's aficionado at football, so trying to explain the offside rule in an audible way is going to be challenging for me. But my understanding is it's when the ball gets passed to a player on a team, and it's the player going, the team going for the goal, and the player on the team trying to score is closer to the goal than any player on the team trying to defend, if that makes sense. So it's to try and get rid of people hanging around the goal, because you could have a player just hanging by the goal. nobody else on the team trying to defend is anywhere near them, and therefore this rule then says, well, if your goal hanging, your goal gets disallowed if you were to score. And it can be really frustrating because it did come up in the Euros. We scored a goal and then it was disallowed because of the offside rule. So it's quite a frequent thing.
You've got your goalkeeper has an amazing kick. He can punt it all the way up the length of the other end. You've got your opposing attacker on that side, and you can just slot it into the goal. If you're behind, this is really great, Chris. I've learned a thing today. If you're behind the opposing, the team that's trying to defend that, gotcha. So what this camera technology is going to do, that's based on iPhones, is it's going to watch to see if that invisible line is crossed, basically.
Yeah, it is like an invisible line, and sometimes you see it when they do playbacks. With tech these days, in the commentary room, they can draw the line on it and really show it to you. It's very clever how they play it back. But I think this is quite interesting because it's kind of like with some of the contact sports at the Olympics. They got sensors all in their bodies and things, and there's just a lot more tech now coming into sports. I think for the referees, so that I guess it helps the ref so that they're not just making their opinion of a decision. They've actually got the data and the tech to back it up.
This is very cool, though, because what it's doing is it's drawing 3D versions of the players' bodies just using iPhones, though. So it's not using loads of 4K cameras dotted around the pitch to look for this. They're actually making meshes of the players to see if any part of their bodies are in front of anyone else, and it's continually watching all the players all the time at 200 frames per second. I mean, that's really cool.
It is quite cool. I'm amazed it's iPhone. It's weird, isn't it, how iPhones get applied to this kind of stuff. It's great for Apple.
Good cameras.
I wonder if Apple had taken a cut of the streaming revenues and the sponsorship in the ground and everything else that's going on.
Well, were all those stories about Apple maybe getting Premier League for Apple Sports, wasn't there? Maybe it's this. They were spotting iPhones around the various stadia and all the rest of it because they were building up this technology. It could equally have been something like that.
Yeah, so they're moving away from 4K cameras that was significantly more expensive, and this is a quote from them. We wanted to see if we could move to a more off-the-shelf mobile phone. The company ended up using iPhones, largely because it's what the company's employees were most familiar with when it comes to things like software development, which does kind of make sense. You don't need to learn any new hardware. You already know how to use your iPhone, and then off you go.
Yeah, I think it's very cool. If you can make this with more sort of commodity hardware rather than a specific TV camera or something that's on there. I can't think a 4K camera is going to be that much more expensive than an absolute top-end iPhone, really.
That's kind of what I thought, and I'm surprised they haven't just got cameras in the ground that's they're permanently fixed to cover the whole pitch. I'm quite surprised.
But I guess if you've got a system like this, however you set them up, whatever stadia you go to, and football's just the start. You could very quickly see this going to rugby, hockey, sort of any other team-based sports where they might have an offside rule, and I know both those sports do. And then they sort of expand it to other things. But again, the Hawkeye system at Wimbledon is really expensive and really complicated, I think. So imagine being able to do this with just one iPhone or a couple of iPhones stuck around, the court somewhere. There's a lot of courts that got to cover it. Potentially, this could roll out a version of this into sort of league soccer or cups or Sunday afternoon soccer or something like that. So, look, I'm calling it soccer now too, but you know what I mean. Maybe there's applications for this beyond that, beyond the Premier League.
Yeah, because you're removing the barrier to entry. Most people have got a phone, and say Wimbledon, for example, you've obviously got the referee station around the side. If they all just had a phone on them, that could help, I guess. So it is super interesting, or it had it positioned. And it's easily to replace. It becomes a lot more commoditized, doesn't it? In that there's very little barrier to entry. I know it's £1,000 phone, but for somebody like a big sporting venue, there's not a lot of money.
You wonder about things like this. I'm definitely going off on one now. Things like Final Cut Pro's remote camera feature, which one iPad can control multiple phones. Wouldn't it be quite cool if the refs just had their phones in their pockets and were wandering around, and then you had that extra thing? Again, I know rugby does this. I presume football does as well. When there's matches going on, the official is talking to the players. You get like an official's eye view of the camera when they're actually talking to the players.
Oh, okay.
You look surprised they don't do that in football then.
I don't watch that much football, so I wouldn't know.
But the referee in rugby matches, if you're watching an international rugby match, when he's having a go at them because they're not behaving well, and he gets them in to talk to the two team captains to say, if your players don't stop doing that, I'm going to penalise you. You quite often get the ref's eye view of that.
That's
and it's
quite cool.
Obviously down on their chest there somewhere because it's taped to them. So having these kinds of technologies, you think it does really open up lots of things of new interesting ways of being able to watch sport. And for any listeners who don't like sport, sorry, but the applications of this kind of stuff are really cool.
It is cool, and tech is certainly doing a lot, I think, in sport at the moment, because I've noticed on Formula One there are even more cameras on the cars than before, and you get some amazing shots, and the amount of footage they must be putting together very quickly to beam the race around the world is impressive.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Other things that are good stuff is apparently Rivian. You can now get Apple Music on there. So in the same way my Tesla, I think it's the last 14 or 15 months. It hasn't been that long we've had Apple Music inside of the Tesla. Is now available there. Now Apple Music is available for Rivian too, which is good.
It is good. Annoyingly, the screenshot in the linked article actually looks quite a good app. Like, why can't my CarPlay one look as good as that? It just looks really nice flow, how it goes, across the screen. I guess the joy of the Rivian one is they're probably only building for a couple of screen sizes, whereas obviously CarPlay is super flexible to go from very small screens all the way up to big wide screens. But the app looks really nice. I do like the look of that. I'm amazed Apple aren't doing more in this space. I think we've said it before. Where's Apple Maps in cars that don't have CarPlay? Where's Apple Podcasts, Apple Books? They just seem very slow at getting these apps out there. If people aren't going to have CarPlay, get your services out there.
Do you think they charge Rivian 30% for having this app running?
Surely, though, it's in Apple's interests. Kind of like when Netflix launched on everything. It's in your interest just to get everywhere, to be omnipresent, so that people carry on paying the subscription rather than have a reason to cancel it and move to Spotify.
Yeah, I mean, this is a win-win, isn't it? If you're an Apple customer and you've got your playlist built up, you want to be able to access that just from the control screen of your car. And I got to say, it's very like the Tesla implementation, except it's more red on the Tesla implementation. It looks a bit more like the Apple Music app does.
Right.
I should probably have taken a picture of that at some point. But yeah, this is fine, and it's very like Tesla's implementation, like I say. But in order for it to work, you've got to be an Apple subscriber, obviously. You've got to have Tesla, or in this case, Rivian's active internet connection. So I can speak for Tesla more authoritatively than I can for Rivian, because we don't have Rivians in the UK. You pay your tenner a month to Tesla to have a continuous internet connection, and then it will just be signed and it will work. Or you tether your phone before you put the car on drive, so you can put your phone in wireless hotspot mode, and then you're able to access internet-enabled features of the car via your phone rather than the SIM card that's built into the car. Because I'm cheap and I don't think it's worth it. I don't pay the tenner a month to Tesla, so I need to do the tethering thing. And generally I forget. So I don't always have Apple CarPlay running, and I just run it off the Bluetooth connection as I would for most things. But actually, when it's working, it works really nicely. It's a good app.
Yeah, I think it's good they're doing. Like I say, Apple's just too slow. So it's quite expensive, though, like you say, because you need Rivian Connect Plus, which is $14.99 a month. Then you've got Apple Music on top, which is a good $10 a month. So that's $25 a month. Now I get there's other benefits to having the Rivian Connect Plus, but it's quite expensive, though, isn't it?
I don't know what your BMW is like. This was free for the first year. And it's not just you've got internet in the car, it's you've got live mapping, you've got Netflix when you park and you're charging and all that kind of stuff. It comes with more features than you'd get for that $15 a month in this case. But for me, again, it wasn't really worth it, because I'll use Waze generally when I'm on the go, I can get by with a Bluetooth, or I'm not charging for so long generally because I'm going to go and have a pee, or I'm going to grab something to eat rather than sit in the car and watch Netflix. The car charges really fast. So it wasn't worth the extra money for me, and I suspect this to be true of Rivian too.
Yeah, I don't pay anything per month for my car. I may have to once it's out of warranty, I don't know, but I just use CarPlay, so I don't really use any of the BMW features, but it does have all the mapping and the updates. That just happens.
Yeah, the car still gets updates. I installed a software update for the Tesla yesterday, which is always a really weird experience in a car. And I don't know if does your BMW do this? You get an over-the-air update, and it says, right, for the next 40 minutes I'm updating myself and don't use me.
Yeah, so you can pick when you say, perform the install now, but there's not a lot of updates out for my car.
One a month for the Tesla.
Okay, mine's more like one every 6 months, and
yeah.
I think there was one that was a meaningful update. Everything else has been nothing.
One a month, and occasionally they're quite significant. They mess with the light, so they change the mapping software. The most recent one is very nanny, actually. The car has always sounded an alert when it thinks you're going to hit something, so it doesn't like cars parked at the side of the road if you're sort of going down a narrow road. Now it's going off all the time going, you're going to hit this, you're going to hit this. Or a pedestrian is on the edge of a curb and it'll alert and highlight the pedestrian in red on the map. And in many ways, it's a good feature. If you're not paying attention or something like that, then, oh my gosh, what's changed in the environment? And you sort of scan the environment because your attention may have been on the road rather than on the pavement. But as with Apple's stuff, you kind of get an alert fatigued. If it's just bleeping at you all the time, then you're just going to ignore it bleeping at you all the time. So it's a double-edged sword, this kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. I know I think there might be some law changes in the I was going to say EU, but we're not in the EU, in the UK, because they certainly had to make some of the warnings a lot more sensitive, I guess is the right terminology, for people and cars. So I have noticed that since some of the updates, but I get very few updates, which is good and bad, I guess, because at least the car's consistent, and there's not much more I need my car to do, to be honest with you. But I'm also unlucky in that I don't have the chip that will drive the new OS, whereas people that bought a newer version of my car will get the newer update, the 8.5 iDrive, rather than 8.0 that I'm on, I think it is.
What does that give you?
I don't know, just different colour scheme, I think, at the moment, and different look and feel, I guess. But I do like what BMW have done. The dashboard stuff's really good.
To be fair to Tesla, and I'm not often very fair to Tesla, I do quite like the fact that if you have a Model 3 from when they came out in 2019, you're still on the latest version of the software, and you do get all the updates, and you do get the improvements to adaptive cruise control, and you do get all that kind of stuff, as well as mapping and lights and all the things that they build into it, and Apple CarPlay and YouTube Music and all the extra features that have come to it over the years, and I think that's a good thing.
I think you meant Apple Music. You don't get Apple CarPlay, do you?
No, I mean Apple Music. But you do get those other bits and pieces as well. Netflix, Disney Plus, when it launched in the UK, they added that to the entertainment screen. Now, does your BMW do that?
No. There's no video to be consumed while stationary. Oh my God.
Why not?
I don't know.
Has it not got a nice big screen?
It's got a really narrow wide screen, so it's like 12 inches wide, but I don't know, 3 inches deep or something. I don't know the exact measurements. I think they should do it. Whether I would use it is another question, but I think they should do it. All the other cars do it. Why wouldn't you? But it is always nice to have a product, and I mean a product generally, whether it's a car or a plug or a TV, that is still getting updates, because you've still got a current model, and that is always quite satisfying, I think.
Yeah, I'd go with that. Fair enough. Moving on. Apple's next big project might be a tabletop robot / iPad. What the hell? I don't understand this at all. I think this is like one of those, we've talked about this before, and the software was built into the last version of the OS, where there was face tracking built into it, so a screen could follow you around the room. We talked about it at the time, that there were some arms you could get for your phone, so like if it was recording, you were doing a selfie video or something like that, the actual robot and the thing could follow you around the room as you went, and that's quite clever.
Have you ever seen anybody use one?
Once, for a car review.
Okay, I've never seen anybody use one of these docks for your phone that tracks you. I don't know. I find it quite odd that Apple did all that work and seemingly not a lot happened with it.
Well, maybe they've done it for this, so there might be an iPad bolted to something that will track you in the room as you go, and it's allegedly going to cost up to $1,000.
But what is it though? So a robot with an iPad on it, but what?
The idea is,
what's it going to do for me?
You put it on your kitchen island as you're cooking, and you've got your Apple playing in one corner and your timer in the other, because we know they're really good at showing you multiple things on the screen at the same time. And as you're going around dealing with your recipe, you've missed a bit in Ted Lasso. It tracks you around the room as you go to pick up the flour to put in your cake, and you can say, jump back 30 seconds, please, and it does it.
This feels a bit over-engineered.
I don't want $1,000 robot iPad in my kitchen. I just want a Siri that will listen to me properly and be able to do what I want it to do. And I'd rather I didn't have to spend another 900 quid. I mean, at the moment, a HomePod is, 99 quid for a HomePod Mini?
Yep.
It doesn't have a screen, and it's absolutely rubbish. Siri is rubbish. There's more fundamental problems for that device than there are sticking a screen on and having me walk around the room with it.
I completely agree. Siri, it's good enough just I usually say, hey, Dingus, play music I like, and it's normally pretty good. Or I hand off music from my iPhone to it, and that's got better over the years. But it does not do the fundamentals that product should be doing.
I mean, from the article, this will contain things like screens facing you and you say, look at me. It will flip around and look at you if you're doing a video call or something like that. I don't need that. If it's on an arm, like an iMac G4 would have been, I can just move it and tilt it and point it at my face. How about actually giving us actual things on our monitors that we can manage ourselves before you go building any robotized technology into it?
Oh, do you think that's where it's going to go? Like the new studio display is going to you're going to have to pay $1,000 for the stand, but it's motorized and it will automatically adjust to where your face is. You could just see it now, couldn't you? It's like something nobody needs.
Stand's already $1,000, so it'll be $2,000 for the stand.
It's a fair point, actually. It's a fair point.
This is unnecessary technology as far as I'm concerned. If
I-
there's a compelling use case, if Apple were building a Hoover, a robot Hoover, fine, but they're not.
No, I do think Apple have struggled in the home. They've just like tvOS has been good, the Apple TV generally, but there's been talk of years for this Home OS coming out. It's never really seen the light of day. There's talk of having HomePods with screens. It's just I don't know. They seem to be struggling in the home, and this seems to be going in the wrong direction. But who knows until we see it?
Who knows? Next story. Google Wallet can make digital passes for nearly anything now. I think this is fascinating, actually. We've all had the instance where you haven't got a train ticket or a plane ticket or something like that can just appear in Apple Wallet, and you do a screenshot of it, and you've got to refer back into your photos to get it. This is effectively a technology where you can turn that screenshot into something that's accessible in the wallet, the Google Wallet case, and I just think that's a genius idea.
I completely concur. A lot of shops here in the UK have made it so that in the old days you could have your club card in your wallet, and now they want you to launch the app and go in the app and do stuff. And it's like, no, I don't want the app. I just want all the cards in my wallet, and I want to share cards with my wife so that we've just got one club card account, 1 point. And I had it with Boots. I think, oh no, you can't use this card because it's already in somebody else's phone. It's like, why have you put that level of effort on it? We just want to share the same points card so that if I buy, I don't know, some paracetamol in Boots, my wife gets the points. Like, I don't understand it. And so in the Photos app, I have an album called Shops, and in that album I just have screen grabs of various cards. I would love to take them all out of there and put them in my wallet. This is what I want. This looks great tech, because you should be able to screenshot it and then just convert it into a card in your wallet. Fantastic. Can I have that, please?
Yeah, well done, Google. You know, we gave you some criticism at the top of the show, but actually this is a feature we want. And imagine that, you know, past we talked about a little bit ago, where you can have alternative wallets on your phone. Apple are going to allow that now. We could have the Google Wallet instead, and the Google Wallet includes this. Awesome.
Do you reckon Google will release their wallet on iOS?
Is there money to be made?
I guess if you take, I don't know how it works. You take snips of transactions. I don't really know how the wallet stuff works.
30%, Chris. It doesn't matter. It's a really cool feature, and I think, you know, it's something I could see Apple starting their photocopiers again to do something like this.
Yeah, 100%. You can see it now.
Although I'm sort of reflecting on that as I said it. Given what we talked about the NFC chip being opened up to have more use cases, what Apple really want are for you to have your proper driving license and pass and all the rest of it. But given the scenario you've just described, where you got to open the app up and you can't share them and all the rest of it, do they want that to happen? Or, you know, I mean, it's quite interesting from a business point of view of the direction of travel they want this stuff to go in.
Yeah, I think a lot of businesses want you in the app now, though, so that you're going there to get the deals. And certainly, like at Waitrose near us, they want you to open the app to get a deal. And so I just want to check out and go. Like, why can't the deals just be on the shelf for everybody? And I just collect my points in the quickest way possible, because there's a big queue. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. They're trying to make it more sticky. It's kind of like with car manufacturers walking away from CarPlay. They're trying to make you use their thing for as long as possible. It's the same in supermarkets here in the UK.
Yeah, fair. Interesting. It's a feature I want, though.
100%.
Should we do some media?
Let's do some media.
I can't remember if I've talked about this, but I'm going to talk about it now. I have been working my way through some old Star Trek. I'm currently on season 4 of Star Trek Voyager, which I didn't watch properly the first time around. I've watched The Next Generation, and I watched some of these other things, but Voyager is one I sort of dipped in and out of. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it. It's actually really good, old school Star Trek. And I know you're less of a fan than I am. You might not be a fan at all. But it's just a really good opportunity to catch up with it again. And I'm just thoroughly enjoying it. I just want to say that. It's great to see these characters, that some of which have entered sort of popular culture, less so than Kirk and Picard and others. But yeah, really good episode. Season.
Star Trek's something I've never really got into, but I should have done, because it's right up my street. I would have probably thoroughly enjoyed it. I've seen the new movies. And I enjoyed them, but I've got none of the base reference material because I've not seen any of the previous stuff, really. I'm obviously aware of some of it, but I don't know why. I think in my house growing up, none of my family were into any sci-fi stuff, so I was probably a little behind the curve, whereas actually in hindsight I should just got into it because it's right up my street.
For me, it was coming home from school, and we had Sky, and Star Trek The Next Generation was on Sky at 6 o'clock. So I'd get back from school, make my dinner, and there on the TV every day would be Star Trek The Next Generation. And I just fell into the habit of watching it every day. It was terrific.
Awesome. That sounds like a pretty good end to a school day.
It was really cool, and the BBC had it as well, but they'd only show it on a Wednesday at about 6 o'clock, I think, and then it would get bumped if anything else was on, as the BBC was wont to do. So it was really hard to watch anything reliably. So it was Sky that made the difference for me for watching Star Trek.
There was no Sky in my house as a kid, so that was possibly why I was missing out. I was deprived.
I was placated with Sky because my parents abandoned me from a very young age, so they left me with these things. So that's what I did.
Okay, say no more.
Deep in a peek into my psyche there. The second thing I'm going to recommend this week is a YouTube channel from an influencer or creator called Hardware Haven. And he does crazy stuff with hardware, actually. He finds old bits of hardware and he repurposes it into NAS or home servers or turns it into 10 gig networking for a 15-year-old machine. He does the odd new thing as well, and this is the creator I was talking about before, who, when he does get sent something from maybe Ugreen or a new maker on the market, he'll talk about what that means, and it might be quite interesting. For example, the featured story for anyone who clicks on the link next week, hopefully, for me, is the best NAS on the market. So Ugreen, who make cables and chargers and power banks, and they're well known for that kind of stuff, actually went into the network attached storage market early last year. They did a Kickstarter for a 2, 4, or 6 bay NAS, and one of the ones they released, they sent him to review. He immediately pulled it apart, found the NVMe drive on the inside and installed his own operating system on this network attached storage thing. It's just a great video, and it's probably a bit too nerdy and geeky for many people, but I just quite like his approach to things, and he presents things very well as well. And it's different from what a Marquez would do, because Marquez reviews the consumer tech as it's presented to him. He sees the other things he can do with it, and I just quite like his approach.
Yeah, I was just scrolling through some of his videos. He's quite you're right. He's got a nice way of presenting it, but B, looking at some of his stats, he's got. Most videos sort of 40,000 views, but there's quite a few 70s, 100s, 200,000 views, 600,000 views. So it's just super interesting. Like you say, it's quite a nice take. He's not trying to be a Marcus Brownlee. He's carving out his own niche. So it does actually look quite cool. I could see my son watching this because he loves what people do and DIY projects. That's right up his street.
Yeah, I think he'd enjoy it. You got anything for us in media?
Sadly not. I don't know how you fit it all in. I don't know. I'm struggling to fit in playing games, watching media, and family and work and everything else at the moment.
We could cheerfully drop the game section, I think, at this point. Both of us are playing so few games. I think we're struggling a little.
I literally just boot up GT7, Gran Turismo 7, have a couple of rounds on that, sometimes with my kids, and then I'm done for the day or the week.
Well, we talked about games. Let's talk about the one. As usual, I haven't had enough time to play. Basically, I've installed it and played the tutorial level. This is a game called Endless Dungeon. I quite like a tower defense game. Kingdom Hearts on the iPad, and it's not Kingdom Hearts, that's the Disney game. Kingdom Rush on the iPad is something I like. So little beasties come in left to right or follow a path. You build towers of guns or wizards or whatever it is to stop them doing it. You knock them down as they come out, and generally you've got a little hero character somewhere on the map to stop them making that progression through. Have I described a tower defense game efficiently enough? I think that's all right.
Yeah, no, I think so. I was just going to look at one I used to play on iOS while you were talking.
So that's the idea of a tower defense game. This is kind of and it's from Sega, a 3D tower defense game where you actually control the character as you would have done for Gauntlet, so top-down or Command and Conquer or something like that. You control one character with your gamepad or your keyboard, and you can make them move around. And they build the towers, but also you can directly shoot the sort of bad guys that are coming in as well as carrying out the upgrades. So it's quite an interesting take on the tower defense game. Thoroughly enjoyed the tutorial. Not had a chance to go back. It's quite weighty. It's like a 6 gig download, I think, for Windows or on Linux where I run it. Yeah, quite good fun. Interesting game. Nice graphics. You'll see if you click on the Steam page link that I've linked through to what it looks like. You get the idea. But you're actually building towers and keeping them upgraded as you would with a tower defense game at the same sort of time. It's quite a lot of fun, and it's multiplayer. You can play 2 or 3 players at the same time. It's cool.
The lighting looks amazing on this game. I don't know how they've done it, but it looks very atmospheric. It looks awesome.
Yeah. Like I say, I want to spend, maybe it's a Sunday afternoon after I finish the MotoGP race, maybe I'll actually get in it to invest a bit more time in it, but I've thoroughly enjoyed playing the tutorial level so far, and like I say, it does look, and the sound is great as well.
Yeah, it really looks good, like very high production qualities. I've added in a game I used to love, and I'm just checking on the App Store, it's not been updated in 6 years, a game called Field Runners. I've played Field Runners 1 especially to death. I love this game. And I'd love to see it probably updated a little bit more and give them some money, because it was just a fantastic game and I found it really addictive, and different strategies for doing it. And it was proper, very simple tower defense game that worked really well on your mobile, and the graphics were a bit cutesy, but it was a great game. And I'm sad that I don't know what happened to the studio behind it, but I'm guessing they've gone away. But this Field Runners game first came out 15 years ago. And,
I remember playing this.
yeah, it was really popular at the time.
Yeah, it was a fucking game. I'd say its spiritual successor is the link I've put in the show notes, Kingdom Rush, which I've recommended, I think, as a certainly an app of the week. We've talked about in games before a couple of times. If you're an Apple Plus subscriber, you can download the early versions of this for nothing, or you can download the subsequent versions for, it's like £4 or £5, something like this. But they're available on every platform. You can get it on Xbox, you can get it on PlayStation, you can get it on Humble Bundle, you can get it on Android. They're really good tower defense games, and if you want to scratch that itch that Field Runners gave you, I think Kingdom Rush is a really great place to start, and it's quite good storytelling too.
My only comment would be I'm not as sure about the art style of Kingdom Rush, but the game, actually looking at it, looks kind of cool, but it's a bit more cartoony art style.
But I think these kinds of games, and you come from Command and Conquer background, where they looked like this, if you kept clicking on the little guys that have a different voice remark for irritating them, these do that. They've carried that sense of humor over, particularly in the audio and some of the visuals for the way that they go. They do it very, very well, this studio. And the name of the studio is Ironhide Studio, I think, for the Kingdom Rush games. But honestly, if you like that kind of thing, it's worth having a look at it.
Okay, I'll check that out.
Particularly as you can get it for nothing with your Apple Plus subscription.
Yep, I will set it downloading while we're talking. Maybe I can try that like you this afternoon. That'll be my gaming.
Should we do a main show?
Let's do a main show.
This is going to be a bit of a departure, I think. This is totally unscripted. We haven't had a lot of discussion about this, Chris and I, so we don't know which way this is going to go. I have pre-ordered but not got, or actually paid the bulk of, a new laptop. I've ordered a Framework 13-inch laptop. I'll say no more than that, except we've talked about Framework in the past, and I just want to get Chris's first take on what do you think of this?
I think these look really cool. Sorry, I was just setting Kingdom Rush to download. I think these look really cool devices, because I love the idea that you can swap things out. I think as a premise, that's a cool premise for a laptop, because it is so frustrating. You buy, a nice MacBook that I bought a couple of years ago, and at some point it's going to age out. But actually, we know that the motherboard, probably in the latest one, is exactly the same size as the one in my current one. So I think this is awesome. I love that you can expand it, because sometimes you buy something and you haven't got as much money, but then a year later, I've got a couple £100 spare. I could upgrade it, and that's what you and I used to do when we were growing up. We'd save up and buy a graphics card, a sound card, a new monitor, maybe a CD-ROM drive, a DVD drive, and you would swap out the internal components. So I think this is fantastic. It's got to be good for green credentials. And I know my 12-year-old son would definitely be in the market for one of these if he had any money and didn't spend it all the time, because it can be a project, and it is satisfying. I think that you can upgrade it as time goes on. So I think the concept, really cool.
So, as Chris says, the real thing about Framework as a company is their commitment to upgrading and having components you can swap in and out of your laptop. And they take this to almost an insane degree. They make two products. They do a Framework 13 and a Framework 16. I think they launched in 2019 with an Intel version, and then later on came an AMD version. But basically the chassis, and we'll just talk about the 13-inch one for the purpose of this, the chassis of the device doesn't really change. It has cooling, it has slots on the motherboard for RAM, SSD, Wi-Fi card, things like that. You can buy them in two ways. You can buy them pre-built, in which case they come with Windows and all these components are on there, or you can assemble them yourself, where you can specify exactly what parts are in there. The building it yourself actually isn't that much. They come with a screen attached. They don't have the top, what an Apple land would call the top case, the keyboard and the trackpad, and they don't have RAM in them, and they don't have SSD in them. They do have the Wi-Fi card. So you basically just need to add 4 or 5 components to these things, and off you go. The adding of the components isn't very difficult, or I hope it's not. I'll find out maybe. If you look at any screenshots of a Framework device, the bit without the keyboard is covered in QR codes. So they've got lots and lots of manuals and instructional videos of how to bring these things, how to put them together. And you can buy them bare. You can buy them, and imagine this: you can buy them without an SSD, and you can buy them without any RAM in it. And you can just stick in your own RAM. If you can find it cheaper than Framework will sell it to you, you can just do that. So you could go out and buy a 4 terabyte NVMe SSD, or if you had one lying around, you could just plug it into this laptop and save yourself a bunch of money. So the idea is they're modular laptops that you can put what you want into if you're not happy with what Framework are giving you. And then to Chris's second point, if something else comes along, you can upgrade it. So a good example of that is the screen I've ordered is a 2880 by, I forget the other part of the resolution, 2880 by something display. I'm going to find it now. 2880 by 1920, 120 hertz display. When Framework launched this laptop in 2019, this frame of the laptop, it didn't come with this. It came 2256 by 1504, 60 hertz display. You can just buy the display for 300 quid and put it in the old laptop you bought in 2019, and you're running the latest display technology. And it's a relatively simple change for that as well. I just think that's so cool.
I think it is cool. I think this is awesome. I think the design, the aesthetic of it actually looks pretty good. And the fact you can just swap things in and out, like I say, when you've got a bit more money or there's new tech, because you may not want to buy a whole new laptop and you may just want to swap the screen. Like, fantastic, you can do it. I wish more people would do this.
Yeah, it's got to be better for the planet that you think, running out of storage on this, I've got to throw away my MacBook because it doesn't fit anymore. I struggle every week to edit this video on a 512 gig SSD, the video for this podcast. I wish I could just bang in a 2 terabyte one instead. Of course you can get around it. I can plug in a USB-C for a bit of fast networking and I can get around it. But when I'm on the go, I can't. And occasionally there's no replacement for just having that storage, fast storage in your laptop, so you can get on and do a thing. So stuff like that, to be able to, as you've said, just be able to swap a piece out when you've got a bit more money, is fantastic.
Yeah, I've got a Mac Mini from M1 from 3 years ago, and I'd love just to, like you, can I just put a bigger hard drive in it, maybe a little bit more RAM, please, you know. It's frustrating that Apple have gone completely the other way on this, whereas it's probably easier for them now because they own the chips. The chips are largely the same design, the motherboards are largely the same. You could possibly, it's probably easier now to swap out than it's ever been for Apple, and they're never going to do it.
What's interesting about this, though, is you look at the device. We'll talk about the compromises you've got to make. For example, it's not running macOS. You've got to make it as part of this as well, but they're not significantly thicker than an Apple device. When you see them next to people's MacBook Pros, M1's MacBook Pros, they're only a little bit thicker than they would be. And then the other concern I have, and I guess I'll find out for myself, is how much they're made of aluminium, so they're well-built devices, and they're as well-built as they can be considering they're modular. So I look at the keyboard, and I wonder how much it's going to flex when I type on it, because obviously it's designed to just pop off relatively easily. So there are sort of quality things you get from, as Apple do, gluing your stuff together. They don't move. The batteries can expand to fill a space and all that kind of stuff. So I suspect I'm going to have to take a drop slightly in my perceived quality of device. But I think I can live with it for sort of the wins you get as a consequence.
Yeah, I mean, I would love the idea that if I bought a Mac in 2019, that I could swap the inners out of it now. Because you're probably like me, you look after your equipment, it won't get scratched and marked that much. And like my Mac, that's like I say, a couple of years old, I'd love to be able to swap some of the components out on it now. I think that is a compromise worth making. I generally think this would be quite a cool piece of kit, and I could see me buying one of these for my son at some point because that's what he would enjoy doing. And knowing in 5 years' time he could buy some new components for it, and he enjoys taking things out, and he'd probably also like to move the ports around. Oh no, I'm just going to put the USB-C over this side now and have the Ethernet over that side because I can do that.
You can absolutely do that. So let's run through what I bought. There's a choice between Intel or the new, and I've thought very hard about this, the new Intel Ultra series chips. So these are the 13th generation chips, so we've had a couple of reports of them eating themselves. So I'm a little concerned about that, but I figure it's on a laptop, it's not going to run that hot. And Framework have been very good about their BIOS updates and things like that as well, so I'm sure any changes that can be made in code they'll be able to make, and I don't think this is going to toast itself. The problem with the higher end Intel chips is they run them at different voltages for overclocking, and that seemed to be the thing that was actually causing them to go wrong. So I've got less concern with the laptop. I want battery life more than anything else, so I was happy just to go for the base slowest because it'll be the most power efficient model of chip in this as well. So that was my decision on chip rather than going AMD because it's newer as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the Intel AMD decision because I'm not qualified to comment on it. I don't really know what AMD are up to. I barely know what Intel are up to these days. So I think your logic makes sense.
AMD are more performant, but it's also a slightly older chip. AMD are just changing their chip generation up to the next generation, the 5th generation Ryzen's. So I went Intel because I figured they're on the current one, and actually because it's this laptop, if I want to switch to AMD the next generation, I'll be able to.
That is quite neat that you're not even locked into your chip vendor.
Yeah, you can specify this with either, but I went for the newer one. I went for the 2.8K display with 120 hertz and the huge resolution because why wouldn't you?
I would definitely go for that screen.
Yeah, and it was only 130 quid more to go for that screen.
Wow,
I know. That wouldn't even get you more RAM.
No, it wouldn't get you anything on a MacBook, I don't think.
I bought 32 gigs of RAM. You can either buy a single channel or dual channel, so I went 16 in each slot because me, the old computer user, I always think dual channel is better, which might be a mistake because it'd be easier to bang in another 32 gigs at some point if I wanted.
That was my only thought. Like, would it be better just to buy one stick and you could buy another stick of RAM, a little bit down the line?
Anyway, 32 gigs of RAM, another 120 quid.
It's not bad, is it, at all?
It's not bad.
Compared to Apple tax.
And I put a 1 terabyte faster Gen 5 SSD in for another 129 quid. So I think that's sufficient for this laptop.
Does it have multiple NVMe ports, or is it just one? I don't know how these things work.
Just one, but this is an interesting thing. If you get into building PCs a bit more, is where the Wi-Fi cards sit is actually an M2 slot. So if you really wanted to do without Wi-Fi and wanted more storage, you could swap out your Wi-Fi card if you were happy to run it wired, and then stick another NVMe in there instead. I'm
not sure I could do without wireless.
You say that, but one of the really interesting things Framework do is they'll sell you a case for 30 quid. So when you get fed up with your laptop and you want to move on, you can actually take the guts out, stick it in a case, and now it's a server, which I just think is an incredible use of old technology.
Yeah, that is awesome, isn't it? Like, I can just take all these components and put them over here. Fantastic. And then keep the body for my laptop and put new components in it.
Exactly. And they've even got somewhere on their website, you can, if you've got a 3D printer, you can 3D print a plastic chassis for your server to put these components in, and you'll be able to use that, so you wouldn't even need to spend that if you had a friend with a 3D printer. And at that point you might not need the Wi-Fi, you might want the wireless, and then you've got 2 NVMe slots to put in.
Yeah, they've nailed this, haven't they?
I think this is getting down to my sort of real thing here, is I want to support this. This is the kind of hardware that I always wanted. Well, Apple used to kind of make. You used to be able to swap in and out batteries and and RAM and all this kind of stuff. Most manufacturers did, and the move to gluing it all into place and making non-repairable and less green technology, it was really sort of spearheaded by Apple. And much as I loved the company, I'm not sure where I am. I think if I've had a Facebook status with Apple at the moment, it would be it's complicated. This is the kind of thing that I want to support. So I don't want them to go away. I want to give them my money, really, so I can support them. And also, I think I'll get a really good device as a consequence.
No, I'm kind of with you on this. I do like the sound of it. I'm largely using some old laptops that I've bought with charitable donations. But looking at what they're doing, I'm quite keen. They even do an outlet on their store as well, which is quite cool. So you can, if you wanted to dip your toe in, buy something simple. And I was looking at one now, and it doesn't come with memory, storage, power adapter, expansion cards, or an OS. And it's like, well, if you know what you're doing, that's fine. But it does seem a really good idea, and I love that you can reuse it all. I don't know, it just seems really well thought out, if I'm being honest.
It is more expensive. If you go and buy a laptop with these specs, it would probably be less than £1,000. So it is slightly more expensive to do this. But that's only in the short term. In the longer term, I'm not going to be buying a whole new laptop down the road.
Yeah, you're buying the chassis now, and the screen you bought sounds amazing. So yeah, I think I don't know, I'm really interested in this. I do like the sound of it.
Yeah, I'm quite excited for it to come. So they come in batches because this is the new version of this laptop. I got into the August batch, so I'm hoping you'll see a shipping notification before the end of the month rather than the September one. If you buy the slightly older version of this laptop, as you've said, they've got it's not a second, it's a clearance, it's a refurb store or whatever it is. You can actually get the components together and you can get one of these relatively cheaply. And you can be in one of these laptops with the lesser screen for 900 quid, which doesn't seem a huge amount of money for something that gives you this potential.
Yeah, and what's it like? Do they do graphics cards for gaming or anything? I have no idea.
So they export eGPUs, as laptops did back in the day. So all the USBs on them are Thunderbolt. So you can have proper external, gaming if you wanted on it. The larger laptop, the 16-inch one, does. It comes with a, NVIDIA or ATI graphics card that you can swap in and out down the line. The 16-inch one is a slightly different beast in the sense that, and if you remind me, I'll put some links in the show notes. The modularity of it and the upgradability of it is even more. That it's sort of pogo plugs that all the keyboard and the modules slot into, so you can move things around within it. If you want your trackpad off to the left instead of in the center, you can do that. If you want some little LEDs making sort of gaming type stuff on the side, you can do that. If you want a numpad and not just a keyboard, imagine that. Imagine having the ability to have a numpad on a laptop. You can specify that as well. And you touched on this, but it's probably worth mentioning. If you flip the laptop over on the 14-inch one, you can choose what you want to put in the expansion slots in the bottom. So they have a variety of modules you can just snap in and out, and they're hot swappable as well. You don't need to turn the laptop off to do it. If you want 2 USB-Cs on your left, it comes with a headphone jack. The 13-inch always has a headphone jack. If you want 2 13 inches on the left-hand side of the laptop, USB-C, you can have that. On the right-hand side, if you wanted a HDMI socket or a display port and a USB-A, you can have that. And you can carry more in your bag, obviously. So if you want a 2.5 gig Ethernet adapter as well, you can just stick that in your bag and you can swap them in and out as you go. And that's across the range. The 16-inch one has 6 rather than 4. So I just think this is phenomenal to be able to do it. And again, you can 3D print the size of module that you want in there, and you can make up whatever modules you want to stick on there. So a few creators and a few sort of designers have come up with their own modules to put in to these sockets as well. So I just think it's super cool.
You can also get to go to the, I'm sorry, I'm specking that laptop while you're talking. You can get to go to the left and right of your keyboard, LED matrix lights as well. This is on the 16-inch, or you can have a numpad. You can have an RGB macro pad module as well, which is, I don't know, there's just loads of options. I do actually quite like it.
So this brings us to the negatives, which is it's not a Mac. And my biggest reservation about all this is that what I've got very used to on my MacBook is how good the battery life is. I know I can take it out for 7 or 8 hours and not even worry about a power adapter, even if I'm really pushing the thing. This is an Intel chip. It will run hotter. They have got fans, all the downsides you have of this kind of hardware. Apparently, this is still good. If you just watch videos on it, it's good for sort of 7 to 8 hours anyway. Which, let's face it, is acceptable enough for most things. It will charge quite quickly. I'm willing to take the hit, basically. I'm not going to run Windows on it. I'm going to run a variant of Linux. And Framework have been very good at official support for Fedora and Ubuntu and a couple of the flavors of Linux, to the extent that this is device as a fingerprint reader on it. You can enroll your fingerprint on the fingerprint reader and have that too, even in Linux. So I'm more than willing to take the punt. And let's face it, what do most people use their laptops for these days? Writing email, writing documents, connecting to their work VPN, doing those kinds of things. This will do all that without breaking sweat. I'm not going to run a lot of my analytical type stuff on this because I do that via the VPN to the bigger computers at work. So I think this will do 95% of what I wanted to do, that I do with a Mac. There is the 5%, which is this podcast, which I need to think about fairly carefully. But I see this more as a project. I've got my work laptop. My Mac's not going away. If there's a deficiency, I'll talk about it, and I'll be very honest about it on this podcast. But I just think, for some reason, I decided I was going to dive in and I was going to get involved with one of these.
Yeah, I can see it. Like, I generally can. I think it looks cool. And I'm quite interested in it, like I say, because I love the idea that I can buy the chassis and then I can, as you have some funds available, you can improve it and you haven't got to start again. Because, like I just said about this Mac Mini, I'd love to be able to pop a slightly bigger hard drive in it or upgrade the RAM. And the fact you can just do it and order it, or you want a new port comes out and you want to go and get it, or you didn't get one with an SD card, but now you've really gotten taken photos and you want to buy an SD port. I just think the whole concept's really good. They've got nice branding. The device looks desirable, and then the fact you can then take all the gubbins out and stick it in a box and have it as a desktop is also pretty neat, I think. So it just seems really well thought out. And here in the UK, all the websites in pounds, they seem to be really supporting the UK really well, which we don't always get. Sometimes, it's in America first.
But you can choose a UK keyboard for the top case.
I saw that. You can have the international keyboard and you can have all the European localizations. The whole thing just seems incredibly well thought out.
And here's a thought. I can change the battery myself rather than having to take it to an Apple dealer to have the top case taken off and then get at the battery and unglue it and put it back in. Amazing.
Really cool. Love it. So now you get a thumbs up from me. I've been interested to see your review of it when it lands.
Thank you. I'm really excited for it, I would say. And it tails quite well sort of my Linux exploration and all the rest of the stuff I've been doing on that. And again, it's not going to be a Mac. I am going to miss pick a random app OmniGraffle, something like that. I am going to miss Affinity Designer. But again, it's not exclusive. I can go back to the Mac. I've got enough Macs lying around that it's not going to be a problem. But at the same time, I really want to give it a proper go, to sort of live that ecosystem and that life a little bit. Because until you immerse yourself in something and you don't let yourself go back, as in my month with Android, you find alternatives, you find replacements, you find a way of getting through. In some ways, you might be more efficient. I really, really, really like Linux's screen snapping. When you drag something to the edge, and Microsoft Windows has done this for a very long time as well, how much of the window it takes up, the Mac's implementation of that is piss poor, and has been for a long time.
When my brother came over to a Mac through his work, he was like, how do I snap on my windows to the screen? What? And I was like, I've not got a good answer to this. You need to install a third-party tool and stuff. So they've never quite been there. I thought they were going to do it on the iPad, and they never did it. Because the iPad shouldn't have had overlapping windows in my view, and I think Apple have struggled there to do a good implementation. No, I think it's fantastic.
Good. Okay. Well, more news when I get it.
Cool. We'll watch this space.
App of the week. Fairly straightforward this week, and it's an iPad app, which I thought you'd like, Chris, because I very, very rarely recommend them. I've got a few comics, which I don't, or adult novels, I think is what you call them. No, that's a different thing. Graphic novels. Graphic novels. Adult novels are something else entirely. Lying around from years and years ago. For example, for some reason, and let's not get into why I've got it, I have the complete works of Tintin. I read a lot of Tintin when I was growing up. They're really entertaining. Hergé is slightly challenging these days, but views from the 1940s aren't the same as the views these days, and I'm well aware of that. But I needed something to be able to read them on my iPad. This is pretty much all I use my iPad, apart from Slay the Spire, for these days. And this is just a really clean, nice implementation. I think it was $4.99 to buy the full-fat version of it. It has a little server built into it, so you can hit SMB, Samba shares and things like that on your network, or you can just drag the comics directly out of, well, it's not iTunes anymore, Finder these days when it's on your Mac. So there's ways of getting your books onto the device is what I'm saying, and then it does a really nice job of displaying them. You can zoom in the same way you can with a Marvel app. It keeps the artwork very good. The management and the library of the comics, if you've got collections, the way it groups them together is logical and makes sense. It's just a really nice, well-written little app.
Yeah, it does sound good. I don't read enough comics. I have a few through Kindle. I've bought a few comics on there. I was reading the Killer more recently, so I can get behind this. The iPad is definitely an amazing device for reading comics on, especially the 11-inch one. In my opinion, I think it's just the perfect size. So that looks good up.
Great. Thing of the week.
Thing of the week. So last week I said Speed was 30 years old, and I got into Speed through my kids, and then in Apple Music, Definitely Maybe by Oasis, the album came up, and they're doing a 30-year anniversary release of it with some, demo songs on it and what have you, and some different discs. And I can't believe that album is equally 30 years old. So I've put a link into that on the Apple Music site, which I can't remember when it comes out. I think it's the end of August it comes out. So one to download if you enjoyed that album as much as I did.
I do like Oasis.
Yeah, I do too. So I can't believe it's 30 years old. So I'm feeling a bit nostalgic these last few weeks.
Fair enough. I think we can call that a show, Chris.
That's definitely a show. So if anybody wants to get in contact with us, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot. I'm at _CJP at mastodon.social. Or you can watch us on YouTube if you go to wakefromsleep.com and click on the YouTube link. Or drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com.
Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.